mentor. This show is for you because our children don't follow what we say, they follow what we do. Love your kids only on Radio Islam International, Wednesdays 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Don't miss it.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Radio Islam International. Today is Wednesday. Love Your Kids, the third season. We at episode 8. Now, we were discussing about, we shared some insights on love being the foundation of a family. We also discussed on what went wrong with the Muslim family. The family values have suffered a decline over the decades, and the rising divorce rate, single parent families, immorality, poverty, and insecurity has affected both children and parents. And the Muslim family unit has unfortunately been no less immune to these developments, suffering our own particular problems and weaknesses. And the Muslim family is supposed to hold the blueprint to success and stability. This was all discussed in last week. We have Maulana Zahir Ahmad Raghi online. Maulana, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To you, Maulana, all our listeners on Radio Islam, Radio Al Ansar, and also those who have joined us on the Ummahat platform. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Maulana, we were discussing about children and their upbringing, and as mentioned just before what we discussed last week, today we start with child development and a sound educational system is what we'll be discussing today. Now, after discussing the importance of the family unit, and no discussion is sufficient in realizing the importance of this family unit. However, we have to go forward, and another important factor is raising good children. In our love for our kids is the importance of developing a sound educational system. And this, perhaps, inshallah, another important factor which we can discuss in our future discussions. If you can share some points on child development and a sound educational system itself.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Jazakumullah for that, Maulana. When we talk of child development and a sound education system, now, if we look at the Muslim Ummah, especially in the past few decades, Alhamdulillah, there has been a serious attempt to reform and to curb the slide into which the Muslim world began to drift. Many plans were put into effect. We notice this with our various educational institutions, the makatib, the Muslim schools, and wherever else. However, in spite of all of that, child education, an extremely important dimension, unfortunately was missing in many of the reformers' agenda. So the Ummah went through many reformers, people wanting to reform the Ummah, observing the various slides that the Ummah is going through. Child education being an extremely important aspect and a dimension, this aspect was for somehow or the other missing in many reformers' agendas. We find, alhamdulillah, great scholars covered many disciplines, many areas of our deen, including theology, which is fiqh, philosophy, politics, sociology, economics, and many reformers have written many books, many workshops, making a considerable and a devoted contribution in their attempt to reverse the decline of the Ummah and improve its situations. Even many efforts in Islah, for the reformation of the Ummah, under the various efforts, for example, the Tabligh effort, the effort of the Khanqa, also the various efforts of Ta'aleem and Halqas. However, the many diseases hindering a righteous Ummah, unfortunately, we notice are ever increasing. Despite all these efforts in the Jamaat, in the Khanqa, in Ta'aleem, educational institutions, our Makatibs, Darul Ulooms, and various others, we do find that the many diseases that hinders a righteous Ummah are unfortunately still on the increase. The tremendous potential, the tremendous capabilities of Muslim individuals and societies are not being utilized or harnessed effectively. We also notice that the gap between Muslims and non-Muslims, unfortunately, in creativity, in performance, in achievements, in science, technology, in the medical field, and in various other fields, are continuously being widened for decades. This gap between the Ummah and many of the other nations in the fields of technology advancements are being widening. We as a Ummah bear this responsibility of exploring that missing link or that dimension and the responsibility of developing a solution. It is our responsibility as a Ummah that we need to start exploring and finding those missing links, all those missing dimensions, all those missing efforts, and the responsibility that we all as a Ummah jointly have in developing and finding the solution for this decline. And this is a pressing need in our times. We need to really examine the issues relating to child rearing, the tarbiyah of our children, the development of our children, the education of our children. This we need to do. And this begins, no matter what we say, with parenting in the home. Unfortunately, many of us have outsourced this responsibility of child rearing, child development, child education. This begins, and it begins with the parenting in the home. And unless the child's psyche, his environment, his mentality, his considering the modern challenges that we observe in our world today, unless the child's behavior, psyche, mentality, his emotional standing does not become the focus of attention from parents and the reformers, unfortunately, we will not succeed in bringing up proper, mature, responsible adults. And this becomes the focus of attention for educators, for parents, for reformers, for asatiza in the madrasa, the muallim in the school, the Muslim ummah. If we don't focus on that psyche of the child, the Muslim ummah will continue to deteriorate and suffer from the decadence and unfortunately the backwardness that we are observing. If we could conduct a cursory survey, historically, alhamdulillah, many traditional reformers focused mainly on our a'mal, which is our religious rituals, and the legal aspects, that means, our masail, our fiqh, etc. And even in our makatibs and in our institutions, Darul Ulooms, etc., a large chunk of the curriculum is focused mainly on our rituals and our legal standings of these rituals. And many modern Muslim secular reformers unfortunately also went on the absolute other direction, focusing much on imitating their former Western conquerors. And we find that this has been something that has created this dichotomy in the proper education of our youth. And as a result, much focus on our, legal rituals, the fiqh, and the other much focus on imitating the Western conquerors and the Western educational systems, the result of that has been that unfortunately the masses, the Muslim Ummah, the general masses, were left with hollow promises and hopes, unfortunately, that are not being materialized. Also, it's difficult to mention this, but we'll mention it. Many of our religious reformers currently, unfortunately, we are full of emotions and perhaps sentimental and propose many a times incomprehensible solutions, while sometimes proposals that are based on an imitation of the golden age of Islam. Alhamdulillah, we need to follow our golden age of Islam, but there has to be a need that golden age of Islam to be adapted to our modern challenges. And unfortunately, we are not always able to do so. Now, there existed no real focus or very little focus on the role and responsibility of women, our wives and mothers, in raising children. If you look at all the various programs that we have, the various lectures that we have, the various halqas that we have, alhamdulillah, much is on Islah, and it's good. Much is on our theological rituals, the laws pertaining to them, but no, unfortunately, no real focus or very little focus has been on the role and responsibilities of women, wives and mothers in raising children. Very little comprehensive scholarship, very little comprehensive literature in dealing with child development, in dealing with child education, in dealing with parenting. There is certainly a lack. As much as we are doing, but there is a definite lack in this field. There is perhaps, I would say, a muted and an inert, just a lack in the ability to strengthen our response as educators to the needs of the general masses. And to the sincere calls of reformers, whether traditional, religious, or modern secular in their approach, most of us as Muslims are unfortunately reactive rather than proactive. Now, Maulana, I do appreciate and I do acknowledge that all this that I'm mentioning now may seem to be a little bit hard-hitting, but if we don't address these issues sincerely and transparently, unfortunately, we will continue to think that everything is fine. Most of us as Muslims, as educators, as reformers, are perhaps reactive rather than proactive. We find that there is no planned actions utilizing good, careful methodologies derived from deep analysis and understanding the problems that our youth are facing today. As those who are supposed to be reformers, scholars, and whoever are supposed to be reformers, we need to ask this very deep question, and that's why we're having this program. We need to ask this very deep question: are we properly addressing both the divine laws, as-sunnah al-ilahiyya, the divine laws of Allah, and the natural and social human sciences that are required in this very important field of child development? As Muslims, we must realize the importance of raising good children. and the long-term effects of raising good children. Subhanallah, like if you just do a cursory glance, the leading companions of our Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the beginning of Islam, most of them were adults when they were addressed by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Their basic characters had already been formed from infancy. They were raised as free, courageous people and were never oppressed by any tyrants. If you look at the society in Makkah, those that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam addressed, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pointed to the importance of a child's character building, despite who he was addressing as adults. Subhanallah, we find regularly, and the books of Sunnah and Seerah are filled with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pointing to the importance of a child's character building. We putting emphasis on character. For example, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the best of them before Islam is the best of them after Islam if they understand Islam. Subhanallah, this is such a beautiful, comprehensive statement and hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, saying that the best of those who accepted Islam, who were best in their character prior to Islam, will be the best of them in Islam if they understand Islam. This draws our attention on the importance of building character. The basic qualities of a Muslim, the basic qualities of a person are already set in childhood. And that was the situation with many of the Sahaba Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajma'een. Faith and skills can be taught later to a child. Faith, iman, skills can be taught to a child later in his life, whilst good character cannot. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam began his mission, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we all know, was 40 years of age. Subhanallah, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was 37 years old. Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu was 30 years old. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he accepted Islam, was 26 years old. Yes, Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu was 8. Whilst Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha was 55. Fundamental goals and values are set by the Quran. The first steps towards achieving them, the fundamental goals and the fundamental values of a society, are perfectly mentioned in the Quran, are set by the Quran, are mentioned in the Ahadith, and the first steps towards achieving them are the responsibility of parents. And I repeat, the first steps towards achieving the beautiful fundamental goals and values of our deen are the responsibility of parents. Parents must initiate early character building using the tools of psychology, sociology, communication, and education. We're talking of a good educational system. But the good educational system begins in the home, and that responsibility lies solely on parents. Unfortunately, many of us as parents have outsourced this responsibility. And although basic human values and needs do not change, basic human values and basic human needs do not change. But what's extremely important, and I want us, those that are listening and watching, I want us just to be extremely reflective of what I'm about to say. Basic human values, basic human needs do not change. But the techniques of parenting need to be well researched, needs to be well developed, and needs to be continuously updated. The techniques of how we do parenting today cannot be like how perhaps 20 years ago how parenting was. There is a need to research, develop, and continuously update the parental techniques. Realizing the importance of good parenting and that the position of nations is mostly determined by how we raise our children. The position of the ummah, the condition of our ummah, is mostly determined by how we raise our children. And realizing the importance of good parenting will and should necessarily bring to us this important factor that we need to understand the current demands, the current challenges of society, the current demands and challenges that our children face when they go to school, when they interact with other people. Several courses have been developed worldwide to implement parenting skills and bring the subject more widely into the public arena. There is lots of work taking place. However, we as Muslim Ummah, the leadership of the Muslim Ummah, the scholars of the Muslim Ummah, if we ignore this window of opportunity, this can become extremely costly to the Ummah, and no nation can afford this big loss. Much benefit can be achieved by providing courses on parenting for parent and parents to be, establishing community activities to promote the awareness of raising children is extremely needed and highly beneficial. So this, as Maulana, as you said, I'm just giving an introduction with regards to how important this aspect is. Jazakallah. Maulana, if there's any comments, anything that you want to bring in, please feel free. Sometimes, we go into a tangent perhaps.
Now, we're listening to what Maulana is saying very carefully. Alhamdulillah. So, any comments, please do send us the comments on 072-786-1548. That's 072-786-1548. Now, if you look at a closer look at the need for a social educational system, the inadequacy of Muslim educators, if we want to reform our children's education, we need to take a hard look at this education system, especially in the Muslim world. We say some Muslim schools today are criticized for the lack of understanding with regards to the nature of the child. For example, the way they may consider children's games a vice.
Yes, Maulana. So the inadequacy of our Muslim educators. It would have been ideal that we have a proper teachers training college, a Muslim teachers training college, where our Muslim educators are trained. And this is, I think, perhaps a need in our Muslim Ummah in South Africa. If we want to reform our children's education, there is this need, as you correctly say, to look hard at the education system that we have in the Ummah. We have schools, we have madrasas, makatibs, darul ulooms, yet these are criticized for the lack of understanding with regards to the nature of a child, the way we may consider certain aspects of children. a few questions that we really need to ask regarding our educational system. There is a message here, salams, listening to Maulana, very interesting. However, in every town, we should have causes available for solutions for parents with younger children. Jazakumullah for that. So, a few very, very pertinent questions we need to ask with regards to the inadequacy of our institutions and our teachers. Firstly, is our curriculum based on the stages of the child's development? We're talking of Muslim institutions and the curriculums that we have developed. Are they based on the child's development, on the psychological and emotional development of a child? Another very important question that we need to ask, and I don't have all the answers, is it mostly coercive, dry, and inflexible? Most of our curriculum, especially in our primary first grade of our Muslim institutions, is it mostly coercive? Is it dry? Is it inflexible? Does our curriculum ignore the inquisitiveness of children? And those that have young children, as parents, as grandparents, we might observe that children today are extremely, extremely inquisitive. And without us actually realizing, they are extremely sensitive and observant. So, does our curriculum ignore the inquisitiveness of children and the natural tendency to practice sport and play games? If you look at children today, subhanallah, if you just for a few days, perhaps for a week, let us as parents and educators just spend that time in just observing the little kids that are in our environment, in our surroundings. You will find that they are extremely observant, they are extremely inquisitive, and all children today have this natural tendency to practice or to play sport and play games. Does our educational system cater for this natural need that is there in our children today? Does it instead only rely on rote learning and memorization? Historically, two distinct types of schoolings could be identified in the Muslim world. If you go into history and into the seerah and in the history of the Muslim world, two distinct types of schooling and educational systems could be identified in the Muslim world. First, historically, there was the private, sound, well-designed style of education for the children of the elite. Now, we're talking of not historically just a few years ago, but we're going very far back into history when there were Muslim rulers, where Muslims were ruling in most parts of the world, where we are talking of. There was this private, very sound, well-designed style of education for the children of the elite, such as the rulers and the rich. Their children were taught by highly qualified, compassionate teachers. Highly qualified, compassionate teachers. The mu'addib in the private palaces. These teachers, these tutors were instructed to prepare children for leadership and excellence. That historically was the way many of the children of the elite were educated. There was a specific aim that prepare our children for leadership, prepare our children for excellence. You find rulers such as Marwan ibn Abi Sufyan, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, Hajjaj al-Thaqafi, Harun Rashid, rahimahumullah, and others had great teachers. These teachers were given the facilities needed to educate children in the disciplines of religion, in the disciplines of culture, in the disciplines of literature, as well as certain skills and practices. One disadvantage of the system was of one-on-one teaching is that the children were deprived of the advantage of learning within a group of students. So that was historically how many of our Muslim rulers were educated. This is in marked contrast to the second system of perhaps how we have our makatibs today, how we have our schools today, how we have our various religious institutions of Darul Ulooms, etc. The makatib, our schools, our Darul Ulooms are for the masses, where only some portions of the Quran and basic ta'aleem are taught. Now, I know you may say that we teach the entire Quran, but we need to really question ourselves. Do we really teach the message of the Quran? Because if we were doing that, we would have had people with softer hearts. One of the reasons for hardness of hearts is we are not reading the Quran, understanding the Quran, reflecting on the Quran. Neither teachers nor facilities are adequate. Teachers used today, many a times, teachers use physical punishment, although it's good that this has now been taboo, the laws prevent that, but teachers used and still use physical punishment as a means of disciplining the students. Unfortunately, we find many scholars and our institutions look down upon children from playing. We are discouraging the active, wholesome type of sports, exercising, and we use memorization as the basic method of learning. And this historic duality in the system of education exists to a large degree, even today in some of our institutions. And I put emphasis on some of our institutions, lest I be criticized of what I'm saying. The real victim of this inadequate ta'aleem is the child. Our children are becoming the victims of this inadequate type of teaching. The loss of this window of opportunity to raise and educate the majority of our ummah is difficult to rectify after the minds and hearts of individuals have been shaped. And if we want to revive the ummah, we have to change our way of child raising. We have to change the style of our parenting, as well as our system of education. Hence, there is a dire need to focus on the early years of childhood. There is this dire need to focus on the early years of childhood. To be successful, we need to start addressing the first teachers. And who are the first teachers of our children? Parents. They are no doubt the teachers of the soul and the developers of character. Parents, my beloved parents, many are young parents that are engaged in developing yourselves and your life. You are engaged in searching for your livelihood, and sometimes both parents are out of the home. And there is this marked negligence with regards to this responsibility, no doubt, in many homes. There are no doubt the first addresses of this program are our parents, who no doubt are the teachers of the soul and the developers of character. It is fair to say that a good, balanced model of parenting does not exist today, whether it's in the Muslim world or in the West. Any society that is looking for social change should know that parenting is the key factor for achieving happiness, for achieving morally, for achieving spiritually, and for achieving materially. If we want to achieve materially, spiritually, morally, and if you want to achieve happiness, this begins with good, sound parenting. The mind requires proper reasoning, logic, and we need to understand the strategies that will work in our times today. The heart requires feelings. The heart requires love, tact, and intuition. As parents, we need to understand that that heart of our beloved child requires the expression of our feelings. The child requires the expression of our love. And in fulfilling that responsibility of that requirement of feelings and love, we should, as parents, know that this can only be achieved with good tact, good approach, and to have the right intuition. Constructive parenting should not lack knowledge and the artistic touch of parenting. You know, parenting is an art, and therefore I call it the artistic touch. The artistic touch that we as parents should have and should be aware of in our responsibility of parenting. The building of our ummah, the building of our civilization needs many institutions which can be successful only if these institutions are managed by individuals who are honest, who are creative, who are reliable, who are effective, and working within a consultative environment. Yes, you know, many of our institutions, unfortunately, lack individuals who are honest with regards to the task of teaching, who lack the creative effectiveness, who lack the understanding of how they are being relied upon. And they also lack the ability and the maturity of working within a consultative environment. Raising individuals strong in mind, strong in body, strong in spirit, strong in character is best entrusted to the family institution. And when we talk of family institution, we are talking of parents. And I'll repeat this: raising individuals that are strong in body, strong in mind, strong in their spirit and spirituality, strong in their character. This is best entrusted to the family institution. Now, we spoke about building a good educational institution. The first educational institution is the family institution, and the main managers of the family institution are the parents. And this task cannot be left to schools. It should not be left to the media. It should not be left to the government. It should not be left to social media, although these can greatly help sometimes. No entity is more able to deliver or is naturally eager to promote the best interests of children than parents. Making parents aware of their responsibility is the starting point. Parenting is a lifelong task, not just the first 5 years, although this may be the most important period. At this early stage, parents are major players. And although later on they have the power to continue playing an effective role in shaping the character of children or the lifestyle of the children, if they know how to guide them correctly. And that's the important message that I want to leave our listeners today with. Understand, my beloved parents, the great responsibility on your shoulders. You are accountable to this responsibility. You are responsible for this responsibility. And this responsibility can best be fulfilled by you yourself, the family institution, and the principal or the manager of that family institution are both the father and the mother. Yes, Maulana, if there's any comments, otherwise we can conclude, or if there are any questions.
Shima, there's quite a few comments that have come in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I've observed that many girls that come out of Muslim schools dress so bad compared to girls that come out of schools that are not Muslim schools. Makes wonder what they are being taught. Another comment, lovely program as always. Allah grant Maragi a long life and peace and happiness. I'm 67 years young. I went to a home madrasa 2 doors away from my home. That's one thing I regret. Going to that madrasa did not give me the knowledge of deen I needed. Later in my life, I tried going madrasa with my first child to learn Quran and Tajweed. In my 50s, I attended courses and classes for Quran, Fiqh, Aqaid, Tajweed, and Islamic history. I still need more classes. Make dua I get the opportunity to study further, inshallah. It's very important to go to a good madrasa when you are young. Everything in madrasa are so advanced in today's time, I really missed out. Another one, Assalamu alaikum. Teachers barely have time to complete the syllabus, never mind giving each child their due attention. Smaller classes, perhaps with more equipped or more trained teachers. Added costs to parents for this also. Should parents be referred to their childhood trauma healing by the teachers who pick up issues showing through their children's behavior at school?
Yes, inshallah, this is a very important aspect, the last comment, the children's behavior in picking up the trauma. And inshallah, later in our discussions, we are definitely going to set some time for this very important discussion of observing the emotional position and standing of a child when they come back from the institutions where we send them to, or where they're at home.
So, Jazakallah for that. Inshallah, we'll continue again next week, Wednesday.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.